Hi, Mr. Lemaster here. Let's start with the question. Use the marking tool to identify the directive verbs in the writing task. So we want to pay attention to the directive verbs. These are verbs in the prompt that ask you, the writer, to do something, but they're not just verbs in general. So we're not just looking for any verbs in the prompt. We're looking for verbs that ask you, the writer, to do something. Let's take a look at this first portion. You can see that the prompt has been broken into two parts. Let's look at this first part. Poets write about a variety of topics and use various techniques to communicate their ideas to their audience. For this assignment, you will read Robert Frost's poem, Birches. Okay, we see our first directive verb here, read. I'm going to go ahead and mark that because it's telling me to do something. Read Robert Frost's poem, Birches. Let's keep reading. The second part here. Explain to young readers, or explain to young students interested in poetry how Robert Frost uses poetic techniques to bring his subjects to life. Discuss his two most effective literary devices. Make sure your tone and vocabulary are appropriate for your audience. Whew! There's a lot here, so let's break it down piece by piece. First, explain. So explain is telling us to do something. So to explain to young readers interested in poetry how Robert Frost uses poetic techniques to bring his subject to life. Now, some of you might want to highlight uses here. Some of you might want to mark uses, but it's not asking you, the writer, to use something. It's saying that Robert Frost uses poetic techniques. So you don't want to mark this one as a directive verb because it's not telling you to do anything. We'll continue. Discuss his two most effective literary devices. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark discuss. And discuss is just another word for maybe explain. Explain his two most effective literary devices or analyze his two most effective literary devices. But discuss is telling us to do something. We're not literally going to talk about it. Discuss is just a word we use in writing when a writer looks at ideas and elaborates on them and discusses them or writes about them in more detail. And then make sure your tone and vocabulary are appropriate for your audience. So yes, make is a verb, but it's not going to appear in our writing necessarily. Make sure your tone and vocabulary are appropriate. So I think what we're looking at here is just these are the basics of make sure your writing is grammatically correct. Make sure that you are writing with vocabulary that's appropriate for the audience who will be reading your text. So I'm not going to mark anything here, but I am going to mark discuss his two effective literary devices. I am going to mark explain to young students interested in poetry how Robert Frost uses poetic techniques, and read Robert Frost's poem. And these are your three directive verbs in the prompt.